The Oracl3 Network.
We have an active shooter. We have an active shooter inside the fairgrounds.
Welcome to Active Shooter, a podcast that covers the whys, the hows, and the aftermath of active shooter and mass casualty events.
They have an active shooter in the building. A second call says they are being attacked.
I've been shot. 16910 means we got shots fired. 4:15 ASL. Route 91 sounded like an automatic firearm.
Active shooter, reports of an active shooter,
active shooter mass casualty incidents.
Thank you for listening.
You are listening to Active Shooter, a podcast that may contain adult themes, explicit language, and graphic depictions of violence. Portions of this show may be traumatic for those under 18. Listener discretion is advised.
Millard South High School is a crime scene. Investigators are inside the school right now collecting evidence after that senior high school student opened fire inside the office today. You can see right now no one is allowed inside the school. There are detectives, investigators inside. Police cruisers have been parked at the entrance of the school all day since the shooting happened right before lunch today. Police do tell us that 17-year-old senior, a transfer student from Lincoln, walked into the office just before 1 o'clock this afternoon and shot the principal and assistant principal. The school resource officer called 911 and put out a call for help. Law enforcement officers from agencies all over the metro area descended on the school's campus. Students were rushed to classrooms, the pool area, other offices, the cafeteria kitchen to run to safety.
2 minutes. Sometimes 2 minutes can go by quickly and only feel like a few seconds. Other times, it can seem to last forever. These moments usually happen when we are doing something grueling and are just waiting for those 2 minutes to be over, such as exercising or waiting for the workday to end. If we were to pause this podcast for 2 minutes of silence, what would it feel like to you? The shooting that occurred on January 5th, 2011 at Millard South High School lasted for about 2 minutes. When students and staff were later asked about the shooter and how long they thought it had lasted, they were shocked to learn that it only lasted a couple of minutes. When asked, they would have thought that the shooting lasted much longer, hours even. Survivors believe that there was no way the entire shooting lasted those 2 minutes. In their mind, time had stood still. Active Shooter the podcast is a High Five Holly production, and I'm your host, JT. If you've listened to our prior episodes, you know that the Active Shooter podcast team has taken the No Notoriety pledge, and we will not be sharing the real name of the shooters that we cover. We will be giving the shooters a pseudonym and refer to them by that name throughout the episode. This will help in clearing up any confusion in the story, while remaining true to our pledge in not naming the shooter by their actual name. In today's episode, we will refer to the shooter as Brandon. January 5th, 2011 was the first day back to school at Millard South High School after the long holiday break. At around 8 a.m., students were settling down into their first-hour classes, among the buzz of conversations about their new Christmas presents and New Year's resolutions. Discussions were starting to ebb out. Assistant Principal Dr. Vicky Casper asked senior student Brandon to please come down to the office. Brandon did as he was told, and walked into Dr. Casper's office. She had Brandon's dad on speakerphone and proceeded to tell Brandon that he was to be suspended from school for the next 19 days. You see, on New Year's Day, which was just a few days earlier, Brandon was caught driving his car a red Honda Accord, fishtailing and spinning his tires across the football field. The police were called, and he was charged with criminal trespassing. As a result of his joyriding on school property, he was suspended from school for 19 days as punishment. His dad took away use of the vehicle as further punishment. As Dr. Kaspar explained the disciplinary measures to Brandon and his dad, Brandon didn't seem upset, nor did he act in an aggressive manner. Even as the security guard escorted him out of the school at 9:23 a.m., he kept his calm and relaxed composure as he left for home. Brandon's dad was home when he arrived. His dad was a detective with the Omaha police force and was currently working the night shift, so he usually slept during the day. His dad later stated that Brandon was disappointed in himself for the suspension, yet he didn't seem overly angry. Around 12 p.m., Brandon's dad left home to go and run some errands around town. While he was out, Brandon logged onto Facebook and posted an angry message for all to see. It stated, "Everybody that used to know me, I'm sorry, but Omaha changed me and fucked me up. And the school I attend is even worse. You're gonna hear about the evil shit I did, but that fucking school drove me to this. I want you guys to remember me for who I was before this. I know I greatly affected the lives of the families ruined, but I'm sorry. Goodbye." After leaving his last words on social media, Brandon broke into the garage where his dad housed the red Honda Accord after Brandon was caught joyriding. He also stole his father's Glock 40 semi-automatic handgun and drove back to Millard South High School. At 12:45 p.m., Brandon walked into the school, past the school's security guard that was stationed at the front of the school. The security guard who had escorted Brandon off the school campus just hours prior was no longer posted at the building entrance, and a different guard was in his place. He didn't know that the student was not allowed into the school. Brandon walked into the office, signed his name in at reception, and stated that he was there to see Dr. Kaspar. He undid the latch on the counter that was across the office and let himself onto the other side. He calmly walked across the office, past 4 other secretarial staff that were busy working at their desks. Brandon walked right into Dr. Kaspar's office and shut the door behind him. He was in the assistant principal's office for about 4 minutes before gunfire erupted. What was said in those 4 minutes is unknown.
And I don't, really like to talk about a whole lot. So there were 3 students in the office at the time, and I was one of them, and so, I heard a whole lot, I saw a whole lot.
Brandon was composed as he walked out of Dr. Kaspar's office and saw Principal Case was about 5 feet away from Brandon when he aimed and fired directly at the principal, striking him in the back and the hip, wounding him.
And it just sounded like there were tables being slammed down, and then one of the administrators told us to hurry up and run and get in the kitchen, and so it was kind of scary.
A security officer saw Brandon as he walked out of the office. Brandon aimed his gun at the officer, but he was able to duck out of the way, and Brandon never fired at him. The security officer had just escaped death. Kent McCants, a 50-year-old custodian at the school, was the next person to come face-to-face with the shooter. Kent had no time to react to the shot that came out of Brandon's gun. Kent may have had a guardian angel, or someone looking out for his well-being, because the bullet missed Kent, hitting the wall behind him. A school nurse, 68-year-old Carolyn Fell, was hit by some debris that busted apart when the missed shot hit the wall behind Mr. McCants. Thankfully, she wasn't tragically wounded and was able to be treated and released at the scene.
So during the lockdown, it was more of just survival mode. And so, there wasn't a whole lot of other thoughts. It was just, how can I help myself and help those who are around me?
As the sounds of the shots rang out, another assistant principal immediately went to the school's intercom system and announced a code red, which is the secret word used to let the school know that there is an active shooter in the building. In a quivering voice, the assistant principal added, This is not a drill. The code red told the teachers to have their students huddle into the rear of their classrooms, turn all the lights off, and be as quiet as possible.
I told her to be quiet and that I loved her because I didn't know what was going on. So it was really upsetting, and it was hard to get a hold of her.
Some of the students texted their parents telling them of the shooting and that they were currently in hiding. One student even texted her mom saying, quote, "There's a shooting at the school. If I don't make it out alive, I love you." It is unfathomable to have to think about writing a statement like that as an adult, let alone a child. Even more unimaginable would be a parent receiving such a message. A school resource officer made a help an officer call, which let other officers know that there was an officer in trouble and needed help immediately. This, as well as numerous 911 calls that came in, caused multiple officers to race to the scene. As officers arrived at the school, many of them entered in tactical gear to ensure that there was no longer a threat inside the school. Just because students and staff could no longer hear shots doesn't mean that the shooter was not in the school, laying in wait to shoot at a moment's notice. What they didn't know was after shooting at custodian Kent McCants, Brandon got into his Honda Accord and fled from the scene. Police raced to Dr. Casper's office as she lay bleeding. She never had a chance to protect herself as she became Brandon's first victim that day. She was shot 4 times in the torso as she sat at her desk. Once police were able to clear the office part of the building, paramedics raced in, trying to save the life of Dr. Casper. She was heard saying, "Help me," in a small voice, using the last energy she had to ask for help. A helicopter was waiting at the school to take her to Creighton University Medical Center. The police started clearing the school and getting statements from witnesses. Some of the first statements made named Brandon as the shooter. Investigators raced to the home he shared with his father. Brandon wasn't there. About 35 minutes after the first 911 calls came in, a suspicious vehicle was found in a parking lot about 1 mile from the school, near 148th Street and D Street. The car was a red Honda Accord, and as the call came over the radio, officers knew that this was the car Brandon was last seen driving. As police approached the vehicle with their weapons drawn, they knew the driver was armed and dangerous. They found Brandon sitting in the driver's seat with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The shooter was no longer a threat.
I just don't even know what kind of person would do that, and especially because he was saying sorry about it before it happened, so he knew it was wrong, and why he had to take his own life before he or after he took tried to take 2 other people's. I just don't understand it.
All of the Millard schools went on lockdown, and a family reunification center was set up at a church near the school. Buses took children from the school to the church to be reunited with their parents.
To be perfectly honest, you see this stuff on the news all the time, and it doesn't really hit home until the call is directed towards you and it's your kid in that school.
At 9 p.m. on Wednesday, January 5th, 2011, Dr. Vicky Casper was pronounced dead. Dr. Casper's son, Ron, was a science teacher at Millard schools, and it is heartbreaking to think of him losing his mother in such a traumatic manner. It was his mother's love of teaching that made him follow in her footsteps.
Shooting at Millard's house, 14905 Q Street, 14905 Q Street. Information follow 85, 83, 84, 86, 88. Command 80, expedite. 83, clear. Radio command 80.
Command 80, clear.
King 90.
I'm en route from the assembly. Just repeat the address.
Millard South High School, 14905 Q Street.
Shots fired. Help an officer. 147th Q, Millard South.
Millard South High School, 14905 Q Street. Shooting. Help an officer. Millard School, South High School, 14905 Q Street. Shooting.
21 number be around.
1252.
Baker 71, Hall 91, we're also en route, unmarked white minivan.
1252.